Hey guys, George here at SoundTraxx, and this week we're going to do another quick installation. In this particular instance, we're going to go ahead and install a Blunami into this Bachmann F7. So we're going to show you how quick and easy this installation can be. We're going to go ahead and add a Blunami PNP and show you step by step. So let's go ahead and get started. So now we're sitting here at the workbench. We've got our Bachmann F7, and so the first thing we need to do is remove the shell. Now, as you can see here in this illustration diagram that you can get on Bachmann's website, there's 4 screws that are located on either side of the fuel tank here, and what that does, that it holds the body shell in place. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get a screwdriver. We're going to reach in, and there we go. And we're just going to reach in and undo these 4 screws. Now these screws are way down there, so it may take a little bit till you find the screw head with the Phillips head, especially being deep in there. So, all right, now with all 4 of these screws removed, we can take them and pull them out. Yep, it's loose. It's just not coming out of the hole. So one of the other things we may need to do here, it appears, is we're going to have to pop this coupler off. So there's a little clip that holds this coupler in place, just like that right there. We're going to pop this out, and then we're going to pull the, let's do this, there we go. We're going to pull the coupler out, and now the body shell comes off nice and clean, so we can set the body shell away. Okay, now one of the things that's handy to have is a small little, leftover dish or something like this that you can put all your screws and couplers and stuff like that in place to help keep everything there. Now, this decoder here is actually one of our SoundTraxx sound value decoders. This is a decoder that we've done for Bachmann for their regular standard sound. But we're going to go ahead and upgrade that today with this blue PNP. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to take these 2 screws and then we're going to go and desolder the wires. The underside of this board is marking the wires for what they are. Normally you're going to have 2 for the track power, 2 for the front track power, you have 2 for the headlight, and then 2 for the motor. And that's basically it. There's no backup light or anything like that. So we can go ahead, actually I'm going to get my smaller Phillips head screwdriver, and we're going to remove these screws that hold this circuit board in place. So that's one. And then this will be number 2. So we can set that aside. Now you can see our decoder comes up and out of the way. And this is where we can find out, like this, for example, you can see here, this is our motor plus, and then the gray wires are motor minus. Here's our right rail, left rail track power. These are the speaker terminals here. So there's a speaker in here, but because we're upgrading to a Blunami PNP, we want to make sure we use the 2-watt amplifier speaker. So we're going to replace the speaker just to make sure. Then here's our left rail, right rail again for the front truck, and then here's our power leads for the headlight. So basically, these wires are a lot longer than what we need. So we can just simply cut them, or you can desolder them if you feel more comfortable doing it that way. Honestly, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. The advantage to cutting them is you can retin the ends rather than having to deal with leftover solder, but I'll show you both examples. So here we're going to go ahead and take our front LED headlight wire, and we got our soldering iron on here. There you go. So you can see we can pull those wires out. Okay, now we can do the same thing for the other side over here. Now in this case, the headlight is just held in place with this plastic clamp, so don't worry if it pops out, no big deal, because we can always stick it back in there. So our headlight comes out. Now we're going to do our speaker wires. There's one. There's 2. And then we have our track leads here. We're going to go with track lead 1 and track lead 2. So you kind of get a feel for what this is. in what we're doing. It's nothing fancy. And then, like I said, we're going to do the same thing on the back here for the motor leads. For the motor leads, though, I'll show you the difference. We can just simply cut these too if we want. We can just simply cut them and move them out of the way. Just take note of which color goes to which side. And as we know, the orange wire went to the motor plus and the gray wire went to the motor minus. And then our black wire has already separated, and then we're going to do the same thing there. So with our red wire. So there's our free decoder, and like I said, all the numbers and everything are on the underside here. So inside here, one of the things we get a lot of questions on, there's some, we're going to move these speaker wires out of the way because we don't need them there. But one of the things you're going to notice, there's a whole lot of circuitry on here, a bunch of capacitors and some resistors. Honestly, these are doing nothing more than fighting RF interference. It's basically for compliance with UL or FCC compliance for motor noise, things like that. You can remove it. You don't need to remove it. It's entirely up to you. In this particular case, we are not going to remove it. We're going to go ahead and put some double stick tape on top of it, and then we're just going to attach our orange and gray wires directly to the decoder. So let's go ahead and do that. So now, I gotta find out. Oh, it's over here. So we're going to get our double-sided foam tape. We're simply going to trim this to get us a cut piece that's about the size of the decoder. Now, because of the thickness of all this stuff, I want to put a couple of layers on the foam tape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one down. We have some space, as you can see, almost the thickness of my finger before we get to the sides of this. So we've got plenty of clearance. So I'm not real worried about clearance. Clarence. Ha. All right, so there's one piece. Then we're going to trim across. And we're going to go with our second piece. And this is just going to give us just enough to make sure that none of these electronic components are touching the decoder. And then now basically we can install the decoder. So we're going to get the decoder out of our packaging here. We're going to set the speaker aside for the moment. So we have our decoder, and normally I do a lot of these, so I don't necessarily need to read the packaging, but I highly encourage you to open it up and look through the packaging. It gives you some basic information to use when it comes to operating and using the decoders. There's also a wiring diagram, so if you have any questions as far as which wires go where, you have the wiring diagram inside there, but also you have the terminals labeled on the underside as far as what their purposes are. So if you ever gets questioned and you lose this packaging, or you decide not to open it, you've got terminals here. But I encourage you to look at it because there's a lot of great information that'll help you understand how to wire the decoder to make sure things like, for example, we're about to do this LED headlight and we want to make sure we don't burn it out. So our motor plus is towards the rear, the motor minus is towards the front, as you can see here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and position these wires so that they come in. Now I don't want the wire to go onto the tape, so I'm going to kind of route around the tape a little bit. Then what I can do is trim the excess, and then we're going to get the wire strippers, which are over here off to the side. And we're just simply going to trim the insulation up and off of the wire. And then just to make sure there's no frayed ends, we're going to twist the end to make sure that all the wires are nice and tucked in neat. And then we're going to get our solder flux. Now this is, as you can see, well used. I'm in the need to get some new stuff. But this is made by a company called Chip Quick, part number SMD 291. And you can get this at DigiKey. It's about $12 for a syringe. I've had this for quite some time, and you can see I've used quite a bit of it. I'm actually about to have to place an order for some, so I'll be getting some soon. But with the syringe, we can control how much we put onto it. So when we tin the end of the wire here, we can put a little bit of flux on the end. And let's move all this stuff out of the way so that the soldering iron cord doesn't get it. But we're simply going to touch the wire, and the flux is going to draw the solder off the end of the iron and into the joint. And so now we have a nice, perfectly tinned wire. And we're going to do the same thing on this gray wire, but the good news is we have a lot more gray wire to work with, so we can cut this piece a little bit shorter. All right, so we're going to do the same thing here. So we're going to go ahead and trim the insulation off, and you don't need to do too much. You can always just do a little bit. We're going to go ahead and put some flux on the end. And I know it's hard to see on camera. There's not a lot of flux on there. You don't need a lot, but just a little bit will do enough. And that's what you're seeing, the smoke burning off, is the flux coming off and burning off. So as you can see, we've got excessively long wire. We can cut these short because we're just going to go through the terminal. So now, as I said, we've got our motor plus and motor minus. So we're going to go ahead and route this wire around. We're going to put this up through the hole for the motor plus. And we're going to put a little flux on the joint. And then we're going to basically solder it in place. So we're going to go ahead and get some solder on the end of the iron. And we're going to go ahead and solder it in place. And there you go. Now it's ready to go. Now we're going to do the same thing on the motor minus terminal, which is right there. Put some flux on the end of this as well, or on this joint. Now we're going to get some solder. And we're just going to solder the joint right there. Now tinning the wire, pre-tinning the wire helps the solder flow and helps hold it in place. So now you can see these are soldered in place. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim the excess wire off the top. And we have a nice clean installation. So now we're just going to tuck our wires in to where they're not on the tape. And we're going to go ahead and mount the decoder down. Just like that. And you can position this. Actually, I've got it setting in there backwards. Look at that. So let's put this around this way. Huh. Guess I wasn't paying as close attention as I thought. That's okay. The good news is we didn't break it. We still did motor plus, motor minus. So now we have our decoder held in place just like that. So now we can attach our track leads. So we have our red track lead here, and we have our black track lead here, and we can come up through these holes just like that. Put a little flux on these joints, and I actually want this to come a little bit more like that. Now we're going to get some solder on the end of the iron, and we're just going to touch here. There's one. And then there's two. And again, we're going to trim off any excess wire, and that just helps make sure that nothing's going to short up against it or anything like that. And then at this point, we can tuck in the wire so that it's kind of out of the way. Oop, there we go. All right, now we're going to do the same thing for the back. For the rear track. Now this decoder seems to be sitting more at an angle, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a small piece of the foam tape, and I'm just going to put it on the back part of this, because the back part seems to be where the front is where the components are, and the back doesn't seem to be any components, and so that's why it's kind of sitting downward like that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put some tape under here to try to balance it out a little bit. Is this important or mandatory? No, not really. We're just doing it so it looks better. There we go. So now you can see it sits a little bit more flush and even through there. Now we can readjust our front track leads, and then we're just going to do the same thing on the rear. So again, now because we cut them, we have to trim and tin the insulation. Whoops, I accidentally cut that. So now we're going to strip the insulation off. And we're going to do exactly the same thing we did with the motor leads. So we're going to twist the ends to kind of tighten up the strands to make sure there's no loose strands that potentially could be causing problems. Put a little solder on the ends here, or flux, I mean. Listen to what I mean, not what I'm saying, folks. All right. Now with our solder, I need to get my lead of solder sticking up off the workbench table here. All right, so we're going to put a little on the end here, a little on the end here. All right, now our wires are tinned. Now, you can do this before you mount the decoder. You can do it after you mount the decoder. It's just a little trickier maneuvering the wire to get in up through the holes. Honestly, in this case, we can solder it flat on there, and I think I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little flux on these tabs for my track leads. Now remember, red is on the right side, black is on the left side in this particular case, and make sure you're consistent when you're doing your decoder installation, or double check it, because sometimes you'll see that wire color flip depending on the brand and the model of the decoder. But in this case, what I'm going to do is, instead of going up through the holes, I'm just going to lay it across the top of the tab here. We're going to go ahead and put some solder on the tab. Whoops. I'm going to move this out of the way so I have a little bit better angle. And we're going to go ahead and just, whoops. Now my fingers are not cooperating. There we go. And now we've soldered that in place. So now let's go ahead and get some solder for the other side. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to approach it at the angle. And there you go. Now those are soldered in place. So you don't have to go through the holes. I personally like to, but you don't have to. And then we just tuck these wires down and away. So now let's look at the speaker. Now we've talked about this needs to be a 2-watt speaker, and since there's a speaker housing right here, we're going to go ahead and pull this off. So there's 2 screws holding the speaker enclosure in place. So we're going to pull that off and just set it aside, and we're going to do the same thing over here. And then what we're going to do is pull that off. And I'm not really sure. It doesn't really say what the rating is, so we're just going to go ahead and replace it. So to do this, we have our speaker on the table in front of us. We're going to just go ahead and reuse the wires, because why not? So one of the things I like to do is to make sure to prevent the magnet on the speaker from jumping up and attaching itself to the soldering iron, is I'll lay a tool usually over that, so that way I can kind of help hold the speaker down so that it doesn't come up. And then we're just going to take our soldering iron, and just like we've did with the other stuff, we're going to desolder the wires off. Again, we have more than enough wire here, so you could cut it, but this saves us a step so we don't have to tin the end. And so there's our speaker. Now we can set that aside. Like I said, I don't know, it doesn't say, well it does, I'm sorry, it says 8 ohm 1 watt. Now that 1 watt could be nominal, it could be peak, so it's just as easy to replace it. We know our 28 millimeter, while it says 1 watt on the back, we do know that it does have a 2 watt peak due to the ratings of the speakers that we bought. So we're going to go ahead and pop this out of the packaging here. If I can get my fingers to cooperate with me, there we go. Now we're going to do exactly the same thing, but in this case we're going to use our flux because we want to make those solder joints onto the onto the speaker. So we get some solder, we're going to put that in here. There's one. And then there's 2. And that's how quick and easy it is. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this, we're going to put those speaker wires through there, and we're going to mount our speaker up inside here. There's a little slot on the side here where the speaker wires will come out. So we can do that. And then we can simply mount this down in place. Okay, there's one. We got our other speaker, our other screw for the speaker mount. And there we go. So now our speaker's mounted in place. You can see the enclosure's on there. This part over here is open, but it's not a big deal because we want to baffle the back of the speaker. So now we're just going to run these up to the speaker terminals, which are actually these two right here. These are the two speaker terminals. So we're going to go right to there. So we have plenty of extra wire. We can trim and cut it, but we don't have to. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter either way. Tell you what, this time I'm just going to go ahead and leave it with the excess length because, like I said, it doesn't really make a difference to it one way or the other. So get our tweezers to hold the speaker wire in place. We're going to feed it into the hole here, and then we're going to bring our soldering iron in. Whoops. And we're going to solder it in. And then we're going to do the same for the other one. And there we go. So if you have the excess length of the speaker wire, it doesn't matter. Like I said, we're going to go ahead and tuck that in just like that. And that'll be perfectly fine once we put the body shell on. So the last thing we need to do is to do our headlight. And one of the things with the headlight LED is we do need to add a resistor for the LED. So we're going to grab our bag of 1000 ohm resistors. And we're going to go ahead and solder one of these to the leads. But first, to do that, we're going to slide the shrink tubing over the end here. And this is part of where the frayed end is coming into play because it's catching the outside end of this tubing. There we go. All right, let's go through. There it is. All right, so now we're through there. So the next thing we want to do is we want to shorten one of the leads of this LED. Of this resistor. Go ahead and put a little flux on the end of it. Now this is where you're actually just going to solder it like this. So we need to make sure we have something to hold the resistor. So we're just going to use a pair of tweezers like this to kind of hold the resistor in place. I'm going to get some solder and just kind of solder it just like that. Then, once this is done, then we can take our insulation, slide it over the resistor, and then this connection will be perfectly insulated. That's a little bit of a tight fit, but just to make sure, we're going to go ahead and put some heat on it from the barrel of our soldering iron to try to shrink it down a little bit. And you can kind of see it's shrinking down, and that way it'll kind of grip that bean shape of that resistor to make sure the insulation doesn't come off. So now the last thing to do is to solder it to the headlight terminals. Now if you look closely at the front of the decoder here, you see this rectangular shaped soldering pad, and then you see this oval shaped soldering pad. Now that's the gold color pad. The squares are actually rectangular, but the oval shaped pad is your V+, and then this would be technically your headlight quote unquote output, and that'll be your V-. And so when you're doing this on the resistor here, what we're going to do is we're going to cut this lead short like that. Then we're going to take it and bend it down just a little bit. You can actually cut a little more off of that. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to put some flux here on the end, and then with my tweezers we're going to hold it in place. And then we're going to grab our soldering iron, and we're just going to mount that to this, and then we're going to solder it in place just like that. And now with that done, we take the V+. Since there's only the one headlight, we only have to worry about one wire. So now we can take this and put this V+, the red lead, onto the V+ terminal. And we basically can do the same thing. We're just going to solder it to the tab just like that. And there we go. Now that is done. You can see that we've got your headlight output here, and then we have our V plus, and then now all we got to do is snap our LED back into the housing, and it'll kind of come in here. Let's see, how did it go in? Like that. Looks like it holds in place like that. So there you go. There's the completed installation. So now just to make sure, we're going to go ahead and put the shell on it. Oh, this wire looks like it's getting in the way and not letting those screw terminals come down for the 4 mounting screws here on the corner. It was catching right there. So now we can come back down and just go right in place just like that. So let's take it out to the layout for a quick test drive. And like I said, guys, you saw how that was in real time. No edits, no cuts, straight installation. So let's head out to the garage. Okay, guys, we're out here at the layout. We're going to go ahead and turn on the track power. Give it a second to boot up. And we have track power. So let's go ahead and blow the horn. We got our headlight on. You can see that. We're going to go ahead and start moving in the forward direction. We can move in the reverse direction. And you can see that you've got full control of this locomotive. Now, as I said, this is a Blunami, so you can also use the app. Right now, I'm just currently using my DCC system. We've done videos showing you how to do the setup and so forth. So now the next thing we need to do is put our 4 screws back in place, remount our coupler, and this will be another successful installation. So that's all we're going to do for this one. This is just a quick install video showing you start to finish. So hope that was helpful for you. And be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel so you can get more great content like this. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at support@soundtraxx.com. Guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.